My name is Zishan Umar, and I'm partner at RO Middle East. On my right is Carl Chan, flew all the way from Hong Kong. Thank you very much, Carl. On my left, Sajesh Nambia, Director of Business Applications, Petrofac. And to my far left is Mr. Noman Mia, CFO, Bait.com. Thank you, everyone, for joining me on this panel. Yes, definitely we'll talk about how to get things started on the digital journey. But I think before we actually get into that, I would just like to just quickly talk about what exactly is digital transformation all about. And I think we must have experienced, observed, or read through a lot of different kind of definitions. But I would just like to throw this question at you, Sajesh, first. What is the definition of digital transformation, not theoretically, purely from a practical standpoint?
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Zishan, for the introduction. And I understand it's the second day towards the fag-in, so thank you for attending this conference and listening and being here to listen to us. So, digital transformation, the definition. So I think we have, digital transformation topic had been around for a while. While it initially first started by saying that, okay, digital transformation is about any means by which new revenue streams can be introduced in a business using some digital tools. That's how the whole digital transformation thought process started. And then what we have been traditionally doing as an internal IT organization, digitizing internal processes and everything was kind of called digital optimization. But I think toward now it has kind of come together. So in my mind, digital transformation is all about adopting digital tools which will really help introducing new or enhancing existing business processes, culture, and most importantly, enhancing the end user experience, be it a customer, it could be an external customer, or it could be your internal customer, which is your internal end users. The whole objective should be to definitely give better insights to decision makers, and of course to, as I said, better end user experience. But of course, the whole idea is to give some path-breaking operational efficiency. So it's kind of amalgamation of that, which is kind of now, I think, should define what the digital transformation is.
Absolutely. Let's bring in Carl into the discussion. Carl, we do understand the digital transformation has become not only critical for every organization to leverage the tools which are available, but at the same time, can really organizations ignore the digital transformation and understand the consequences of doing that?
Yeah, so I think obviously it's very difficult for you to ignore it unless you don't want to grow your business, unless you don't want to do it more efficiently, etc. So I think just like as Sajesh, you also just mentioned, digitization is about improving, I think, a few things, right? I can say there are a few objectives. So one is to improve what you do, right? So for example, your data processing, your reporting. With digitalization, you can do it more faster. You can do it more accurately, reduce your human errors, etc. Second, you can change how you do things, right? Change how you do things. So for example, in your existing structure organization, you need like many people who are processing paper-based things. But with digitization, you can do it like more quickly, in a more structured way. So that's to change how you do things. And then the number three is to do things that you were unable to do, right? With digitization, you have tools to help you, for example, as we discussed in another section, maybe people can use AI or machine learning models to do modeling. There are some corporates who have already used such tools to, for example, forecast the future cash flows and also to analyze the customer behaviors, do customer segmentation, and then to improve their overall performance. So all in all, I think it's not something that you should ignore. It's something that you should learn it and then to put it into your overall business.
Absolutely. Toman, your turn into the question. I think I just would like to shift this discussion slightly towards for you from a finance perspective as well as from a talent perspective as well. Let's see how the skills and the talents required, especially, okay, you can definitely touch upon the finance, digital transformation, of course, but do you see a different kind of a skill sets, mindsets required within the organization, both at the leadership level as well as at the teams who are executing it? Yeah, so what's your take on that?
So I think the points already being made are quite important here. And ignoring is, of course, it's like a big truck coming your way and you're just ignoring it. So, of course, the end result is probably you don't want to be dead after all. So the kind of skill set, and then you have picked up the right word, which is mindset. Because probably you may or may not be able to find the skill set within the organization. And you can, of course, go out and acquire talent. But the challenge with that is somebody who's walking in new or he doesn't understand the culture of the organization. His biggest challenge would be the digital transformation for an organization where he's fairly new. And the biggest shortfall, and you have done so many implementations, you understand that it's never the technology which fails you, it's generally the people, where you have adaptability challenge, where people don't want to change. They just don't feel like, or they're just so engrossed with their own whatever ways they were following. It's just very difficult to transition them. So mindset is important, because if you have a mindset of embracing change, you have the right attitude, you can open and honestly communicate within the organization, because any implementation, any digital transformation starts with communicating with your peers, with other departments, with your leadership. So basic skill set is important. Even, I mean, as a finance professional, even when we are talking to different departments, the way we can add value to any organization is through communication. So that is definitely something that is required for your existing people, and you create that culture within that organization. So it just, you help people grow and you help put people first, and you'll find out that you can tackle most of the difficult challenges.
To be honest, as an implementation student, let me put it this way, it's the people are the most challenging part of the entire implementation. So Sajeesh, what do you think from your experience perspective? We've seen organizations struggle to pick up the right path to kickstart the digital transformation across the organization. It could be maybe understanding what are the revenue streams they can actually get into, or maybe transforming one particular function to another. So what's from a practical perspective are the key components in, I would say, that gives the head start to the organization, and they start thinking about what digital transformation, how can they actually achieve the full digital transformation to the potential?
Okay, that's a great question. So in my mind, maybe it's the top 3 or 4 things which any organization should start when they're thinking about digital transformation is about first to look at their whole business strategy. Where are they going? Where are they at this point in time? And where do they see themselves in the long term, 5 to 6 years? Now, and I've been part of the internal IT organization in all my 22 years. I've been part of GE, Philips, Emirates, and now Petrofac. So I've seen both the success stories and some failures as well in digital projects. So once we have the business strategy clearly, then it comes to, for the IT team to kind of understand, or at least try to baseline where they are at this point in time in future-proofing the organization from an IT readiness perspective. How are they from an infrastructure perspective? how are their applications in place, how many of them can be retired, how many of them can be moved to the cloud, how many of them need to be re-architected, how many of them need to be left untouched because it's too critical and moving something will completely upset. So baselining that and then starting to look at what are some of those critical strategic technology platforms which they can invest in the long term and slowly trying to bring the organization towards those integrated landscape. Now, when they start a digital transformation journey, the thought process should not be like, how fast can we do things that we have been doing before? It should be more about how much we can harness the power of the technology that we have bought to maximize operational efficiency, getting those business insights, and making it very simple for the organization to use. Why I say that is because many of the new generation folks, the millennials as we call it, they're used to this app world, self-service, and then they come into an enterprise organization, find very clunky tools, 10 clicks to get to a final result. Obviously, they get, frustrated. So that's a very important part. And the third part is that, to also look at the organization and really look at what are the kind of roles that we need to have in terms of, I would call it the intellectual property roles, which are very important. Some of the commodity roles we outsource, but what are the roles that we need to build for future-proofing our organization? So in a nutshell, the answer should be the business strategy focus. Second is aligning IT strategy towards that and trying to see the fundamentals where we are and trying to future-proof it. And third is looking at the organization and seeing what are the roles that they need to keep and what are the roles that they need to enhance. I wouldn't say make it redundant, but enhance, and looking at how do we train people also. So probably these are the maybe 3 factors that need to be looked at for starting a DT journey.
Absolutely. Carl, your turn. What do you think? I think the point I'm trying to make with you is that, digital transformation, of course, is a very international, globalized, I would say, initiatives organizations take. But of course, every region, every culture may have slightly different way of approaching it. And within the organization, when we talk about the digital transformation, may it be in finance, in sales, in supply chain, in warehousing, wherever we talk about. But from a business leader's perspective, do you see from your experience, they have a different take on that? They see it, of course, they should be seeing it less technical, but more value proposition for them. So what's from your experience and how difficult it is for them to comprehend what a digitization can help? I just give you a quick example. Could be an e-commerce, bringing the e-commerce into the picture. So especially say for a retail industry. So what kind of understanding they can build to kickstart this digital transformation?
So I think just like Sajeev mentioned, I think for digitalization is more than just a process improvement, right? So it should come from like a strategic target. What do you want to achieve first, right? So I think, and then obviously that is the business leader's job to define their business targets. And then they can discuss with the whether it's IT, whether it's other responsible parties in the firm on, okay, how can we actually try to achieve these targets, right? So, and then obviously there can be a lot of options for them to try to achieve one thing. Then I think obviously then for the operational side, for you to clearly put down your options, you perform your pros and cons or cost-benefit analysis for each of those options. Then you will be able to subject it for board discussion, for your senior management's decision-making on which is the best way to go, right? I think Sajeev has also mentioned that, what do you want to keep, right? What do you want to improve? What do you want to get rid of, and get new process or new solutions like that? Yeah, so I think all in all, I would say from the business leader is to give a target, right? Maybe some targets. And they may also need to give some metrics on how they want to measure those targets on an ongoing process to see whether the transformation is successful or not, whether these are meeting the targets, right?
I think ROI, return on investment, is sometimes gets quite subjective in the digital transformation projects, but just coming back to the finance side of it, be it be implementing an ERP solution, be automating a certain process of, say, accounts payable, reporting process. So from a CFO perspective, what do you think is an alignment approach with the business strategy? Your company want to go in one direction, you want to contribute towards the business growth. So how critical finance function is, especially from a CFO office, driving that?
I think following on the business strategy is important, because whatever steps you take ideally should be aligned with your business strategy. And in some cases, for example, accounts payable, probably the business won't even feel the change because they are not directly involved with the exercise. But of course, how does it impact the department, of course, but as well as the ones who are the users, end users. And so it becomes more important that one, that you make sure that you are aligning with the business strategy, plus you're getting some sort of ROI, at least if not in terms of dollar value, but in terms of added value, which you may or may not be able to measure, but at some point you will find out that your baby steps have helped you to get to a point where you can be a lot more digital than where you started off from. So the challenge with any organization when they're starting off on their digital journey is they just don't know where they stand and where they will their real objective to go is. So that's where you probably, from a finance perspective, the investment value that really drives your goal for achieving digital transformation. And there you need to make sure that whatever you're spending, it's aligning with the business strategy as well. But again, the digital transformation can be quite different from one organization to the other organization. I feel it's like, and you picked up on the millennials point, but if I go to my parents, for them, just using a smartphone is a digital transformation. For me, probably going on an Instagram is a digital transformation. So for my kids, they are already there. So they have a really good starting point. So of course, that's obviously, then your objectives are also driven by where you would want to be at the end. So but aligning is important for sure.
One thing which, from all this conversation, which it means a lot of digital noise as well, Sujesh. I mean, we talk about, there was an era in the early 2000s, we used to implement ERP, that used to be the only digital transformation thing. Fast forward 15 years, we realized, that's redundant. It is again, by the way, it popped back in the business. And there's so many different tools that are now being made available. That's why I call it the digital noise, because it's, you need to find the opportunity. And to find the opportunity, you need the right leadership across the functions to understand what exactly is the right digital tool or initiative that if I leverage, I'll be able to get the maximum ROI, and of course, help me grow as well. What are the opportunities? And how do you identify? That's quite a critical question a lot of organizations ask themselves.
It's an interesting thing you brought about digital noise, and I got a very interesting memory of that, because a few years back I was leading the digital transformation agenda in a company, and my boss, the CIO, both of us were having our quarterly business review with the CEO of the company. So half an hour we went ahead talking about all the great things we have done and how we have conquered the world and met SLAs and all this great stuff. So he listened to all of that, and towards the end, he asked, okay, what are you guys doing on blockchain? Now, this was not a very IT savvy CEO, and him asking about blockchain, it completely stumped us. Now, we found out later that the 2 days before he was traveling, and some Accenture consultant was sitting next to him, and for the 1 hour he was sitting next to him, he completely brainwashed the CEO with all these flavors of the season. And so my CEO was thinking at that time, okay, why aren't my guys talking about blockchain to me? Why aren't my guys talking about bots? So my boss comes back after the meeting, and then he said, Sajeesh, do something, get some bots running. So that was the kind of pressure internal IT teams are on. But that was, when you asked about all the noise, it kind of reminded me of that incident. But the key thing to remember is the opportunities that we need to keep, I think, at a high level is as to how are we driving operational excellence? Are we able to, what are the things which will give a better insights to the business leaders for faster decision making? What will help our internal teams, our end users, to better collaborate and do a lot of self-service? What are the things which will reduce manual error? I think these are some of the common themes. None of them are, aha things. These are the regular stuff that we have been doing, but I think these still continue to be some of the guiding principles that need to be kept in mind when we are identifying opportunities for digital transformation. Sure, there's going to be a lot of noise, new technology will keep coming in there. It is definitely important to, at a times, do a POC, maybe to keep the CEO happy, I don't know. But I think these are the guiding principles, and those are the opportunities that we need to keep looking out for.
I'm doing a lot of POCs just to convince my customers a lot of times, and 90% of those ones don't turn up to be the customers. That's what my experience is. So POC ring a lot of bells in my head all the time. So just turning this opportunity, and Carl, I know you've been very focused across the corporate treasury. I just wanted to take your experience and I would like you to share with the audience and globally and in locally here as well. So you want any interesting examples, the key trends and the opportunities around corporate treasury, digitization, because that's an area which, especially for a global organization, needs a lot of focus. And as we all know, cash is the king.
Yeah, thanks. So yes, I think for corporate treasury is a fundamental function in the large corporates, and then they do a lot of things, right? Including they may manage their enterprise resources planning. They may work with the banks on even on over-the-counter deals with them. They may borrow money. They may do their internal banking, risk management, etc. So they work on a lot of things, and given the digitalization and the technology and enablement that has been happening over the past years. So now we are using a term like corporate treasury 4.0. So in analogy to the industrial transformation 4.0. So for industrial transformation, we have the first version is 200 years ago, we used steam to run the train, like that. And then we have the second version, which is to basically use electricity, right? So, and then the third generation, we know how to use the internet, right? And then the fourth version, now we have AI, etc., who can help us do a lot of things. So I think for corporate treasury, it's a similar story. Right? The overall history is shorter. It's not 200 years, but it's maybe 20 years, a bit more than 20 years. So over 20 years ago, we're still using paper-based lots of things, using hard copies, etc. But then now it quickly comes into 4.0, which means we use digitization solutions, straight-through processing, right? How do we onboard our customers? assess those customers, perform analysis of the customer behaviors and segmentation, etc. Right? And then obviously, like a lot of automation in terms of how do they handle the internal processes, how do they deal with the banks, or even the credit rating agencies, right? Because obviously they care about their own internal like credit rating. If they can get a better rating, they're able to borrow money at a lower interest rate. Yeah, so they need to work out how to manage that. Yeah, so 4.0 can help them do a lot of these things. In terms of the key trends, I would say a few things. One is about automation of the overall processing, like how do they do the planning, how do they keep in contact or monitor the business performance, because that's what they do. And then how do they work with the business units, right? They may have different products and different business units, and then they are the person who need to centralize all these cash flows, etc. Right? So I think first thing is about the automation, and then the second thing is about like generating more business insights, right? So if they have better technology enabled with like big data, they can perform management such as supply chain management, right? They can manage the fluctuation in terms of the pricing of the raw materials and maybe the pricing of their own goods, etc. I mean, all in all, these are going to impact their future cash flows. That's why with like the new technology and big data and potentially, I mean, the data analytics, they can put like AI or machine learning together as well to help them forecast their future cash flows, to make them more like profitable and maybe more resilient as well, right?
Absolutely. With all that, I think one thing which always, from my own experience perspective, Naman, I would like to begin with you on that. Choosing the tool, choosing the digital platform, having the stakeholders on board. The one thing which always strikes us as implementation companies or being involved in this process is the culture of the organization, which then boils down to the fact of how it is adopted, how it is communicated, and how it is, let me use this word, enforced to drive the business results. So how critical do you think it is?
Well, I mean, as I started off and I said, people are the key players in any digital transformation. It's basically bringing human and technical capabilities together. So that's how you build a digital transformation, that's how you achieve your digital transformation. Now, culture, of course, within any organization is very important because, one, you are going to go through a change. And for change, one thing that you need is everybody to be on board. So if you have a culture of where you openly and honestly communicate, then you can set forth what are the objectives that we are trying to achieve. How is the end user going to really benefit from this change? So that's how you kind of start off and you bring everybody together. You need a leader in terms of pushing the objective of enforcing it, but at the end, it's every single one of you who is in that organization is going to be impacted. And that's where you need to make sure that you take everybody on board. And to be able to do that, that actually starts even before the digital transformation journey has started. You really need to build an organization where communication is easier. It's people are engaged. You don't have silos within organizations. Unfortunately, it happens, and even in the good organization, big organization, you still end up with silos. You need to break those silos, and you need to make sure people are connected with each other to make sure the the objectives are understood by all, and then you can go ahead and, of course, implement it. So, yes, culture is very important.
Asji, I just would like to take your view on that, especially with the perspective that why culture? Because I give a very, I would say, a plain example. Any particular function, let's be say very, very straightforward with finance. One stakeholder, one leadership team wanted you to just replace your spreadsheets with X solution and want to achieve this desired results with X number of days. You achieve that, but there is some kind of either a miscommunication or some kind of a, I would say they are on different paths. The leadership as well as the teams are going to eventually use the solution, system, digital platform, tool. Do you think it can actually be like overcome by setting up certain principles, guiding principles upfront so that it is a sustainable solution? It sustains itself for years to come for the organization. But because eventually who loses from all this is the eventual stakeholder. And that's the context.
So just to add on, Numan talked about the culture and the people. So there was this very interesting concept which about when you have people in the organization, there are three kinds of people. One, you can kind of put them in these buckets or categories, what we call it. So one, say players, other is prisoners, and the third is tourists. The players are obviously people who are completely on the ground, got the skin in the game, want to make a difference, and they slog it out to make that difference. Yeah, so they have it in their heart. Obviously, then there are prisoners who obviously want to do things, but they put some walls around themselves in their mind that probably because of some previous experiences, bad bosses, tough economic conditions, they would always say that, hey, this will not work. We are special. Our business model will only work this way. So they put kind of walls around them. So they're just not open to new ideas. And the third is tourists. You know what tourists do, right? They come and have fun and go back. Right? Absolutely no skin in the game. They just come to have fun and go. Right? So obviously they say the idea is that, okay, get rid of the tourists, coach and mentor the prisoners, and do a lot of tender loving care of your players, basically empower them even more. So that's a kind of a culture that we need to build, and so that's a key part. And the second part is around a lot around the way this whole story of digital transformation needs to be communicated. There has to be always told why, as they say, in the penguin world, why ice is melting, why you really need to move fast and find another home. Otherwise, you will perish. So there has to be a sense of urgency, and that has to be communicated. And second is, when we usually start our digital transformation journey, a lot of big bang happens, big projects start to happen, which takes too long to get delivered. So then there's fatigue sets in, and people start wondering, is it really the right way? So it's always important to, while communicating also, but while during execution also, do it in small chunks, so that we always have these, I won't call it quick wins, but short wins, which can always be, communicated, success stories, and wins, so people start seeing the difference. So, having the right set of people, mindset, there are always going to be prisoners in any organization. There are always going to be some bit of tourists, but I think it has to be aligned, and the communication has to be right, and the execution needs to be faster. If these things need to be kept in mind, I think a digital transformation journey can be quite enjoyable and successful.
I think this topic is so close to our heart. I think we can keep on debating on it, sharing the practical experience throughout the day. I think it's so heartwarming. But at the same time, we are quite there now in terms of the time. We are now open to the questions. We, of course, will get the questions from the online audience as well, which I'm sure will be quite a lot. Russell, I can see, is scrolling through the laptop. If you have any questions, we're more than happy to answer. We have We internally can debate 10 minutes more. We have no problem with that. If you have any questions, more than happy to take. Russell, would you like to throw us some questions? Yeah, you've got.
Yeah, we'll give you the mic, just so the global audience can hear you.
So my question is to all of the panelists and Zishan yourself as well. When you're going through a digital transformation, when you're starting a journey for digital transformation, do you keep data sharing or data selling for revenue or other sources of revenue in digital? For example, now you generate content on digital as well when you're doing your digital transformation. Do you use that as a justification for revenue generation, and do you guys do that for revenue generation?
It's a good question. Obviously, they say, I'm from the oil and gas industry, so I hate to say this. They say data is the new oil, right? But sure, data is power, and a lot of it's not only about harnessing all the data that we have, that we could always think about, hey, why don't we sell this too and make money out of it? I think we have to put that in a certain context to see what do we do with all this data that we have internally to get some powerful insights. Yeah, that's why many organizations these days are going towards data lakes. There's a separate verticals getting created around data science. A lot of data scientists are being, we see these days on LinkedIn, trying to do a lot of modeling and all this good stuff. So sure, data is key. A lot of the systems that we capture are called the system of records. But for sure, for me, what's more important than trying to capture data and sell it to another competitor or to another brother or sisterly organization and make some money is more about what are we doing internally within the company to harness that power, because that could very easily tell us not only about market sentiments and customer feedback, but more so about also to try to see how we can improve our internal processes and make end user experience much more better. That would be my thought.
Yeah, Sajid said about like data is the new oil. I agree with 50% of that. So I'll explain why. So I think you mean data is very precious. That's why we say data is the new oil. I think certainly I cannot agree more with that. But on the other side, data is something that you can generate more and more. But oil is getting less and less. I mean, that's the point. Yeah, so, and then to just add supplementation points to the question, I think data, obviously, it can be something that is very important for the digital transformation, because it's something that will help you realize the value of your digital transformation. But I don't think it's a limitation that you need to have data first before you do your digitization. Yeah, I think the digitization, it can be an infrastructure. Yeah, you can always build it. And then with your business, ongoing business, you can accumulate more and more data. Then you can fuel the analysis to generate more and more insights.
I've just maybe very quick comment on the data. Data itself is an industry to me. Whichever way you want to name that, it's an industry. All the social media channels we use, a lot of them we are using right now, maybe sitting in here, what are they actually? They are social media to us, but the revenue streams or models are all about the data. So, yes, but it all depends in which part of, what kind of organization you are, what kind of parameters or safeguard points you have in place, the data privacy policies, awareness around when the user is actually throwing the data at you, how well it has been addressed, it's not been compromised. So with all those things in mind, yes, data is, as Sajid and Carl mentioned, is an oil, is precious, and of course, it goes on. Any questions? I think.
Yeah, I've got a beauty here. This will keep you going until the end, I think. So, but listen carefully. So, Silvaraman asks the question. He says, most organisations struggle to differentiate supporting processes from business processes, from processes that are critical to the success of the business. So he feels that most organisations end up digitising their support processes without actually addressing the business critical processes within the business. So could you cast some light on that from your experience?
That's a good question. And I guess one of the big reasons where people tend to go for support processes is probably you have an internal audience to push. So if you have you can as the word you said, enforce, you can enforce that transitions to that internal audience. Whereas when you're looking at the business processes, you're probably stepping on the toes of your customers in a way where it might impact their experience. So when you're picking up on business processes, obviously it has to be a lot more accurate, as well as it has to have a good methodology around it. And possibly one of the good ways of doing it is also onboarding your customers that, yes, we are going to go through these transitions together. Once you understand, and again, the business process is driven around making sure your customer experience is good, how you are interacting with externally with other organizations is done perfectly well. Taking that input from customers can also help you make your business processes better. What we unfortunately sometimes do is we shy away from that interaction. We don't want to talk to our customers. We want to sell, but we don't want to talk to them or understand their needs or requirements and take feedback from them. So one of the great ways to just get some feedback is through NPS and understand from your promoters as well as your detractors what sort of pieces are missing. So sometimes we don't even realize there's a broken process, and unless you hear directly from a customer. So I guess that's one of the key reasons why sometimes we just go in pushing changes internally, whereas our business processes are neglected.
Any questions? Or we good to that?
Yeah, I thought some others might have a go at that one as well. But no, we've got a question from Eugene.
I think we can take one question.
Yeah, from Eugene D'Souza. He says, I think that COVID was a great enabler to almost like a compulsion for organisations to go digital in a hurry. How can those that were prodded on by COVID disruption, who may not have had the best roadmap, how should they progress now?
Maybe just a roadmap.
Yeah, it's a lot of people were prodded during COVID to start thinking. Probably everyone starts talking about digital transformation, and they essentially accelerated that in, prodded in, and suddenly they discover now it's not quite the best roadmap. They weren't following the right roadmap. Yeah. How do they change course and start again?
So I think when the pandemic hit, it was all about how do we get our workforce to operate the same way as they did. So the whole digital journey was more about how do we quickly get things onto the cloud? How do we get our people connected from wherever they are? How do we ensure the productivity of our teams? So I think that, the focus, you're right, the focus shifted to that. But now that everybody is getting face-to-face slowly but surely, and everybody's coming back to office at least 3 days at least. Now, I think the focus needs to quickly shift back again, for sure. And as I always say, keeping the customer in mind and the end user experience in mind. So again, going back to the earlier topics that we talked about in terms of the customer experience, getting those business insights, quickly. Now that pandemic is over, we need to revisit those strategies and make some slight adjustments to get back to where we are.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Sajesh. Thank you, Naman, for sharing wonderful practical experiences. And I'm sure there is still more appetite for these discussions to continue, but we have to stop. We are here. We're going to take about 10 minutes break, max, and we'll return with the next FinEx talk. And thank you, gentlemen, and thank you, everyone.